Let's say you just got a piece of property and you want to run some goats on it, but you don't have power, you don't have water. What do? I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. We're setting up an off-grid goats program. And as somebody who likes to put processes together and likes to build out modular kits, I'm going to build out a modular kit that you can build for yourself to extend your pasture range. So maybe you already have electric fences and you have water and everything, but you're going to reach further out in your property with goats or small livestock. You can use these portable systems to set up in these other areas. We're also going to talk about how you can have the human element in there. In Virginia, we're having a little problem with coyotes. And so someone living in close proximity to the goats themselves can help with protection. But we're also going to talk about other types of protection for your animals, positive barriers, that kind of thing. We're also going to look at a low-cost way to get it. So we're going to cover good, better, and best, but there's a lot of folks right now that have been writing in and saying they've got this land, they've had this land for a while, and they want to get started, but they're not able to get started because of financial reasons. And I understand that. Prices are going up. The fence I have today, I should have bought a long time ago because I would have made money on it. You know, it's really an investment in your homestead, but it's also an investment in your bottom line to go ahead and get started now rather than waiting till later. Now, as you know, I've been attending a homesteading mastermind with Scott Vernon and the Sustainable Homestead Institute. And in full disclosure, I'm just a student when it comes to raising goats. Now, I personally had goats we grew up, and I know a little bit about the goats and some of the shot cycles and the different things we have to be aware of. But what I'm really good at is modularizing systems. And what does that mean? That means I can look at a system and say, oh, okay, well, here's the components, and here's how we can adjust the components so that we can pick the system up and move it, and here's the process we need to maintain it. And so what I'm doing is partnering with the Sustainable Homestead Institute and setting up their off-grid goats. So I'll be learning about goats, and I'll be learning about managing goats, and I'll be happy to share a lot of that information with you. And if you want a hands-on experiential program, he actually has an internship program, which I'm going to be documenting a lot of the day-to-day activities for it. So we're literally setting up an off-grid goat system that we can hand to somebody to operate. Now, the benefit of that, we got to talk about this, because if you are unable to get your homestead up and running, let's say you own 50 acres, let's say you own 25 acres, and you don't have agricultural activity on that land, what if there is a way that you could implement a modular system, or you could lease it to a farmer, or you could come out there on the weekends and manage? Now, managing livestock on the weekends only is not a good idea. But again, if it was a market garden, I've told you the story about a friend of mine in the Hampton Roads area who was a property developer, and he would buy farmland, keep it in farmland, but he would hire farmers to go farm the land, and he would hire farmers to do large market gardens. It didn't cost them very much because many times the actual the person managing the garden could go to market with all the goods and keep all the money. But because the tax value of the agricultural property tax versus a residential property tax was significant. And so he was getting paid by not having to pay out money for land he was gaining appreciated value with. And so we'll talk about how modular systems help you get up on a piece of land very quickly while being very light on the land. So a lot of these modular systems help take care of the problem of water, take care of the problem of sanitation for the animals and food for the animals, food storage, stuff like that, but also for the human that's going to monitor the situation. Because like I said, here in Virginia, we've got bears, we've got coyotes, we've got wild dogs. And so I know you folks have been criticizing some of the videos where you see people carrying firearms, but it's a really serious thing if you get, 5,000 pounds of potential goat meat. They don't start out at 5,000 pounds, but the goats potentially could be 5,000 pounds, but they get eaten when they're little, or they die for cold or exposure, or there's all kinds of factors that we have to be aware of. So again, one of the reasons I'm introducing you to this is because I want your questions below. I want to make sure I answer all your questions, but also let's start getting into some of the tips. When we are setting up land, I already mentioned that you can't just put animals on land and check it once a month or check it once a week. It doesn't work that way. So goats might stay in a paddock for a whole week, but they still need to be checked on daily basis most of the time. You need to make sure they have good, clean water. So our watering system will have a reserve tank, or what's called a head tank, and then it'll have autofill or float to the actual tanks itself. Guaranteed the goats are going to crap in it. They're going to climb on it. They're going to knock it over. Something's going to happen. But again, do we have enough reserve of water? If you don't already have an agriculture well on the property, then you're going to have to haul that water in. Now, the bigger thing, I just heard some music. The bigger thing you have to worry about is that sometimes you can't install an agriculture well until you demonstrate that it's agricultural property. And so if you haven't brought in the agricultural activity, it's kind of a catch-22. So we start out with a head tank, and we'll show you exactly how all this works. In fact, you can come out on site and see it once it's complete, or even participate in the build. But ultimately, you need some kind of head tank that has 10 times the amount of water that you need for the drinking vessel, or the water tank that's out there. It needs to have a clear path of access, which could be a garden hose in some cases. Then again, mice eat the garden hoses. Or it could be actual ag tubing, which we'll talk about. But that tank at its minimal level needs to be a week's worth of water for those animals. Now, why do we do that? Well, because we don't want to be filling it up all the time. You know, a 500-gallon trailer, water trailer, like one of those water buffalo trailers, is $13,000. And so unless you got one sitting around, and by the way, you just can't strap 2 IBC totes to an old trailer you got sitting around. You got to have, there are Department of Transportation rules associated with this. But basically, you're going to have to fill up the water somewhere and bring it out to the tank. And if there's a week that you miss for some reason, or you have a problem with the tank or the transfer pump, you're going to need enough water in there for those animals to be okay. You also could have seasonal variations of temperatures and heat. And so if there was a very hot season, they could drink up more water than they typically would use in the course of a week. Now, where do we get water from? Well, you can get water on the property, but you do not want to have the animals getting the water on their own, which would mean they would traverse into a creek or water area. You can set up crossings. I'm not sure if we'll have an opportunity to demonstrate that, but you can set up basins and crossings, but you have to be aware of stagnant water. And so we can talk about that in another video. But again, the head tank, which is a tank on a higher elevation than the water use, doesn't require any electricity, tends to work pretty well. And then we'll talk about the maintenance on that, because you do need to drain it periodically and clean it out, because it will, if it's just an IBC tote, it will mold. And so I think if you watch the videos, you'll see that I've got a 1,500-gallon tank for the corral system that we're setting up, which is going to be using the same model as the off-grid goats. And then we'll be setting up one mobile here with the IBC tote. Let's talk a little bit about shelter. Goats can die of exposure. They're not the brightest creatures in the world. And so whether it's a goat or a pig or whatever you got out there in the field, little tiny cows or something, they need to have some kind of adequate shelter. So we're going to build shelters on skids. We're going to start with one shelter, but it'll basically be on a skid so we can drag it around the tractor. Now, where do we get that idea from? Well, over at the Sustainable Homestead Institute, they already have a giant chicken tractor. And so it provides shelter. It provides water. It gives a place to mount a solar panel so that we can even run a fence charger. And so we're going to set up a lean-to on skids that's pretty easy to construct. And by the way, opt in or subscribe or join our newsletter. We'll show you these videos as they come out. They're not all going to be on the YouTubes. But again, keep the phone up here. Again, shelter. So you can build a pallet shelter. And I've seen a lot of weird videos that people are building permanent shelters. We want to be light on the land. We want to be able to move. So for example, what if you rented land? What if you're the person who doesn't own any land and you want to start homesteading and you just go lease someone's land who has the problem that other folks have, which is they own land, but it's not being used for agricultural purposes, and they're not getting the benefit of the regenerative value of this type of land, of this type of activity. So you want to be able to go set your stuff up, but what if they kick you off the lease? What if they decide they're gonna do something different with the land? Well, you need to have portable systems, excuse me, that'll just roll up onto the back of a trailer and move to the next property. So I've actually looked at an organization here that uses lambs under solar panels. I've looked at nomadic goat herders and farmers that they don't even own land. They just move between land. I've looked at the cowboy style. So one of the things we're doing is setting up a base camp because we're going to be moving over different pieces of property. And so all of this is going to come together in my nomadic caretaker program, but I'm going to bring in the elements that I'm receiving as an intern or as a student of raising goats. And so if you're interested in raising goats for meat or dairy, if you've got land or don't have land, it doesn't matter because this system is portable and it can be moved wherever you need to move it. If you're on a budget, that's okay because this system's designed to be scalable so you can start at where you're at. And then as long as we are honest about your skill set, you just need to be able to access the animals on a daily basis. Could you access it on a monthly basis? Could you access it on a weekly basis? Maybe on a weekly, but you need to have somebody there making sure the water's good, making sure the shelter's clean, and making sure the food, because a lot of times you may not have enough fodder for the animals to have food, to make sure the fences are still functioning. And then again, we'll go through all of that. Now, before I wrap up, my goal is for the off-grid goat system is to have a manual finished that's going to have the designs. It's going to have the care checklists that are important. So I'm working with Scott on these things. It's going to have the guidelines or schedules for getting these animal things out. Some of the insights you're going to need when it comes to knowing whether you should move these animals, because you really shouldn't keep goats on a piece of property for a week. Okay, and we'll have some charts in there with the load of animals, how many animals you can have on a piece of land. But if you've got 100 by 100 foot corral area or electric fence set up, and you keep goats on that for a week, and you've got, say, 15 goats, it's going to destroy the ground. We don't want to destroy the root mass. We don't want to hurt the trees. We want to be regenerative. We want it to grow back better for the animal pressure. And so we'll cover that as well. We're going to have a series of videos, and then I'm actually going to experience this. I'm actually going to be there with the goats 24/7, showing you exactly what's necessary. Now, do you need to be there 24/7? Not necessarily. But again, we're going to be recording videos. We're going to have drone footage. We're going to have a lot of stuff going on. So it is pretty much a full-time thing to build out one of these training programs. And so that's why it's so important that you, in the comments below, you ask your questions. If this sounds like it's something of interest to you, we can take you along on the journey and you can see behind the scenes so that you can get started right away. That's the key thing, is you don't want to wait. You got to get started right now. Just in the first and second year of the Biden administration, meat prices have gone up 25%. And we can't blame it on Biden, because going back to Obama administration, food prices went up 50%. And even during the Trump administration, food prices went up. We're at a critical state that if you want food security, you may have to grow it yourself. Now, we also have the issue where there are large organizations buying up farmland. So this is the thing I'm talking about here, is you don't need to own the land yourself, but I want to keep this community. I want to keep this on a community level where neighbors are taking care of neighbors and we're providing food for each other. So you might use this system on pigs, and someone else might use this system on goats, and someone else might use this system in a more developed farm that has perimeter fencing for cattle. And then all you guys are in the same network. And so you can better organize your pricing, keep your costs down, and ultimately serve the land. Help be a good steward of that land. So I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. If you have questions that I can answer in this course, the Off-Grid Goats, you want to visit www.prosperityhomestead.org or ask your questions in the comments below. If you're interested in free resources to help you get more from your land, which includes land management, access to your land, a lot of the permaculture principles, then visit www.prosperityhomestead.org and go to the free newsletter page and just join our newsletter. It doesn't cost you anything. It helps you get started right away. Helps answer questions that you have. Again, now more than ever, food security, clean water, and sanitation. And those are the key elements that we're going to cover for both humans and for animals and for the land. Thanks for watching. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead.